Canada stands on the precipice of one of the most consequential defense decisions in its modern history. This is no longer a mere debate over hardware or budget lines. It is a high-stakes gamble for the very soul of the nation's autonomy. For decades, the path was set in stone. Buy the F-35, align with the Pentagon, and remain a comfortable cog in the American military machine. But the winds have shifted, and the air is thick with a new kind of tension. This decision is about power, independence, and sending a definitive message directly to Donald Trump. After months of aggressive tariffs, relentless diplomatic pressure, and repeated threats toward Canadian sovereignty, the atmosphere in Ottawa has transformed from cooperation to caution. Mark Carney is now weighing a move that could hit the United States exactly where it hurts by walking away from the F-35 deal entirely. We are witnessing the end of business as usual. What was once a routine procurement process has evolved into a strategic rebellion, a moment where Canada must decide if it will remain a customer of the American empire or finally become the master of its own skies. The real story isn't just about jets. It's about the courage to break a cycle of dependence. As the cracks in the F-35 deal begin to widen, a fundamentally different proposition has emerged from across the Atlantic. Saab is not simply offering Canada another fighter jet to replace an American model. It is pitching a revolutionary shift in how a nation secures its own skies. The Saab Gripen enters the conversation not merely as a piece of hardware, but as a catalyst for a made-in-Canada future. Under this proposal, Canada ceases to be a mere customer in someone else's system and becomes a master of its own. Saab's vision is built on a model of internal strength rather than external reliance. This shift towards self-reliance is precisely why understanding these geopolitical chess moves is more critical than ever. To stay informed on how these power shifts affect global stability, make sure to subscribe to Bradley Madden US. We dive deep into the strategic decisions that mainstream media often overlooks, providing you with the insights needed to navigate an unpredictable world. As we often discuss on the channel, this isn't just a procurement tweak, it's a declaration of independence. Canada is tired of being a client state. Are we witnessing the birth of a new northern aerospace titan? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The Swedish aerospace giant has made a promise that the United States never did: full technology transfer and the establishment of a comprehensive manufacturing hub on Canadian soil. This is the win-win scenario that Mark Carney is now scrutinizing, a strategy where Canada doesn't just buy jets, but builds an entire aerospace ecosystem. The intention is clear: to manufacture, integrate, and maintain these aircraft within Canada's own borders. By working with domestic industry leaders, Saab aims to ensure that the intellectual property and the physical infrastructure of defense remain in Canadian hands. This is about more than just a cockpit. It is about the sovereignty of the supply chain. We are talking about a transition from a buyer to a builder, a shift that allows Canada to escape the shadow of Washington's unpredictable mandates. This model has already been proven. In Brazil, the partnership between Saab and Embraer recently saw the rollout of the first fully fledged fighter built on Brazilian soil. It is a living testament that a medium-sized power can reclaim its military independence. For Canada, choosing Saab would mean choosing a path of capability and ownership, ensuring that its most critical defense assets are never again subject to the whims of a foreign leader. For decades, the bond between Ottawa and Washington was considered unbreakable, a foundation of North American security that was as stable as it was predictable. Canada's path seemed locked into a singular trajectory: the F-35 Lightning II. This wasn't just about selecting a superior aircraft, it was a symbol of total alignment. By integrating into Lockheed Martin's flagship program, Canada was effectively weaving its defense DNA into the American supply chain, ensuring that for the next half-century, its air superiority would be an extension of American strategic influence. It was the default choice, a comfortable, albeit subordinate, position within the orbit of the world's superpower. However, that bedrock of certainty has begun to suffer from deep systemic cracking. What changed the calculus wasn't a sudden failure in the F-35 stealth coating or its sensor fusion. The change was purely political. Under the leadership of Donald Trump, the relationship between these two neighbors shifted from a partnership of shared values to a cold, transactional, and at times openly hostile engagement. The traditional assumption that a close ally would be shielded from economic warfare was shattered by the imposition of steel and aluminum tariffs and the constant threat of tearing up long-standing trade agreements. When your primary defense infrastructure depends entirely on a country that views allies as competitors and uses economic pressure as a primary diplomatic tool, that dependence stops being a strength and becomes a glaring national security risk. Mark Carney and the Canadian leadership are now confronting a haunting reality. In an era of America First, American systems come with American strings attached. If Washington decides to flip a switch, whether through export controls, software updates, or political leverage, Canada's multi-billion-dollar fleet could be grounded or compromised by the whims of a foreign administration. This is the dependence trap that has forced a radical reevaluation of the F-35 deal. The certainty that once defined the procurement process has been replaced by a profound sense of vulnerability. Canada is realizing that true security cannot be bought off a shelf in Fort Worth, Texas, if it means sacrificing the ability to say no to Washington, as the political climate in the U.S. remains volatile and unpredictable. The cost of the F-35 is no longer measured just in dollars, but in the slow erosion of Canadian autonomy. The cracks are no longer just surface level. They represent a fundamental divide in how Canada perceives its future in a world where its oldest ally is no longer a guaranteed partner. The debate surrounding Canada's fighter jet replacement has often been framed through the narrow lens of dogfights and stealth signatures. However, the pivot away from the F-35 toward the Saab Gripen represents a far more profound shift, one that moves the conversation from the battlefield to the factory floor. This is not just a story of defense procurement. It is a blueprint for a massive economic transformation. For Mark Carney and the Canadian government, the Saab proposal offers something the United States never truly could: the keys to a self-sustaining industrial engine. The core of this economic revolution lies in the concept of domestic production. Under the traditional F-35 model, Canada is a Tier 3 partner, meaning Canadian companies participate in the global supply chain, but the high-level assembly and intellectual property remain concentrated in American hands. In contrast, Saab has proposed a model of total immersion. They aren't just selling planes, they are offering to build a manufacturing hub within Canada. This distinction is the difference between being a consumer and being a creator. By establishing a domestic production line, Canada secures the ability to manufacture, modify, and maintain its fleet without waiting for permission or parts from a foreign power. The impact on the Canadian labor market would be seismic. Conservative estimates suggest that this partnership would sustain approximately 3,500 high-paying, specialized jobs over the long term. These aren't temporary construction roles. These are careers in advanced robotics, software engineering, systems integration, and aerospace design. This move would essentially future-proof the Canadian aerospace sector, ensuring that the next generation of engineers and technicians are trained on cutting-edge technology right at home. It's about building a workforce that possesses the sovereign knowledge required to manage national defense independently. Furthermore, Saab's commitment to technology transfer serves as a massive infusion of intellectual capital into the Canadian economy. When technology is transferred, it doesn't stay confined to a single hangar. The innovations developed for a modern fighter jet, advances in materials science, secure communications, and artificial intelligence inevitably leak into the civilian sector. This creates a multiplier effect, where a single defense contract sparks innovation in commercial aviation, telecommunications, and tech startups. We are talking about the birth of a full aerospace ecosystem that can compete on the global stage, exporting Canadian-made components and expertise to the rest of the world. As Saab's leadership has emphasized, this is a win-win strategy. For the company, Canada becomes a strategic hub for North American operations. For Canada, it is an opportunity to reclaim the glory of its aviation history, evoking the spirit of the Avro Arrow, but with a modern, sustainable business model. The promise is to create a supply chain that is good receivers of technology, meaning Canadian firms won't just be following instructions, they will be innovators in the full life cycle of the aircraft. This economic argument is what makes the decision so difficult to ignore. In a world where Donald Trump has shown a willingness to use trade as a weapon, domesticating a multi-billion-dollar industry is the ultimate defensive maneuver. It protects Canadian jobs from foreign tariffs and ensures that tax dollars spent on defense are reinvested directly into Canadian communities. Every dollar spent on a gripen built in Ontario or Quebec is a dollar that supports a Canadian family, funds a Canadian school, and strengthens the Canadian dollar. By choosing this path, Canada is deciding that its defense budget should do more than just buy security. It should buy prosperity. It is a transition from a model of off-the-shelf dependency to one of homegrown excellence. This is the economic revolution from the skies, a strategic play to ensure that when Canada looks up at its defenders, it sees more than just wings and engines. It sees the strength of its own hands, the brilliance of its own scientists, and the unshakable foundation of an independent national economy. In the realm of modern warfare, the word sovereignty has often been relegated to the status of a political buzzword, a hollow term used to stir nationalist sentiment during election cycles. However, as Canada stands at this strategic crossroads, the definition of sovereignty is being radically reimagined. It is no longer enough to simply own a piece of equipment. True sovereignty in the 21st century is defined by who holds the digital keys, who controls the source code, and who dictates the maintenance schedule. This is the heart of the debate between the F-35 and the Saab Gripen, the difference between possessing a weapon and owning a capability. When a nation operates the F-35, it is essentially leasing a black box. The aircraft is a marvel of engineering, but its nervous system is deeply tethered to a centralized American infrastructure. From software updates to mission data files, the operational readiness of the fleet is subject to the approval and technical support of Washington. In a stable world, this is a minor inconvenience. But in a world shaped by America First rhetoric and the unpredictable use of political leverage by leaders like Donald Trump, this technical tether becomes a leash. If a foreign power can remotely disable your primary defense asset or withhold the software required for it to fly, do you truly have a sovereign military? This is where the Saab proposal shifts the paradigm. By offering full technology transfer and domestic production, Saab is offering Canada the chance to reclaim its military agency. Sovereignty, in this context, means the ability to modify your own aircraft to meet specific Arctic challenges without asking for permission. It means having the industrial know-how to fix a grounded jet using Canadian parts and Canadian technicians during a global supply chain crisis. It is the transition from being a user of a foreign system to being the architect of a national one. The proof of this concept is not found in a laboratory, but on the airfields of Brazil. The partnership between Saab and Embraer serves as the ultimate Exhibit A for Canada's decision-makers. By choosing the Gripen, Brazil didn't just buy a fighter. They bought the ability to build one. Just recently, the first fully fledged fighter built on Brazilian soil rolled out of the factory, a triumph of national industry and a middle power's declaration of independence. It proved that a nation does not have to be a superpower to possess superpower-level technology, provided they have a partner willing to share the crown jewels of aerospace engineering. For Canada, the stakes are even higher. As the Arctic becomes a contested theater of global power, the ability to operate independently of a potentially volatile southern neighbor is not just a preference, it is a necessity. Sovereignty means that when the Canadian government decides to scramble its jets, that decision is made in Ottawa, supported by Canadian industry, and executed without a single point of failure located in a foreign capital. By choosing the path of self-reliance, Canada is asserting that its defense is not for sale and its autonomy is not a bargaining chip in a trade war. This is the new definition of sovereignty, the quiet, unshakable strength that comes from holding your own destiny in your own hands. The ripples of Canada's potential departure from the F-35 program would extend far beyond the hangars of Cold Lake or Bougainville. In the silent, calculated world of international diplomacy and defense intelligence, such a move would not be viewed as a mere procurement adjustment or a budgetary realignment. It would be interpreted as a seismic signal, a profound fissure in the bedrock of Western military integration. The F-35 is not just an aircraft. It is the ultimate symbol of the American security umbrella, a multi-billion-dollar membership card to an exclusive club of allies aligned with Washington's strategic vision. If Canada, arguably America's closest and most integrated partner, decides to hand back that card, the global message will be deafening. The immediate consequence would be a devastating loss of confidence in the reliability of the United States as a primary defense provider. For decades, the implicit contract between Washington and its allies was built on the assumption of stability. If you buy American systems, you get a predictable partner. However, under the shadow of Donald Trump's transactional foreign policy, that contract has been stained by the ink of tariffs and the rhetoric of pay-to-play alliances. If Canada walks away, it provides a blueprint for every other medium-sized power, from Australia to the nations of the European Union, to begin their own reassessment. It raises the uncomfortable question: if the U.S. is willing to use economic leverage against its neighbor and largest trading partner, can any ally truly trust that their defense supply chain is safe from political interference? Once this shift in confidence begins, it rarely stops with a single nation. We are witnessing a potential turning point in the post-Cold War era. A Canadian exit from the F-35 program would be seen as a declaration that the cost of dependence has finally outweighed the benefits of technological alignment. It would embolden other nations to seek strategic autonomy, moving away from a unipolar defense world dominated by Lockheed Martin toward a multipolar one where domestic industry and diverse partnerships are the new priority. For the United States, this represents more than just a lost contract. It is a loss of strategic gravity. Every F-35 sold is a strand of influence that ties a nation's military to the Pentagon. Every F-35 rejected is a strand that has been cut. The global intelligence community would also have to grapple with the reality of a dual fleet or a non-integrated North American sky. The seamless interoperability that has defined NORAD for generations would face new complexities. While Saab's Gripen is designed to be highly interoperable with NATO standards, the psychological break of choosing a non-American platform for the core of North American air defense cannot be understated. It suggests a future where Canada no longer assumes that its interests and Washington's interests are identical. In a world where alliances are shifting and trust is no longer a guaranteed commodity, this decision would serve as the first major crack in the Fortress North America doctrine. It is a signal to the world that even the tightest bonds have a breaking point when sovereignty is at stake. The decision facing Canada is far more than a choice between two sophisticated machines. It is a defining moment for the nation's identity in the 21st century. As Mark Carney and the Canadian leadership weigh the strategic landscape, they are not merely looking at technical specifications or cost per flight hour. They are looking at the horizon of a world that has become increasingly volatile, transactional, and unforgiving. By seriously exploring the Saab alternative, Canada is making a profound statement that its future will no longer be an afterthought of decisions made in Washington, D.C. For decades, the assumption of a stable and predictable neighbor allowed Canada to operate under a comfortable umbrella of dependency. But the era of Donald Trump has shattered that complacency, proving that even the longest-standing alliances can be weaponized for political or economic leverage. In this new reality, true strength does not come from the sophistication of a foreign-controlled system, but from the resilience of one's own capabilities. If Canada chooses the path of domestic production and technology transfer, it is choosing to reclaim its role as a global innovator rather than a passive consumer. It is an affirmation that Canadian sovereignty is not a luxury to be traded away for the sake of convenience, but a necessity to be defended at all costs. Choosing the Saab Gripen over the F-35 would be a transformative act of national will. It would signal the birth of a new era where Canadian defense policy is driven by Canadian interests, powered by Canadian workers, and secured by Canadian technology. This is the vision of an independent future, a future where the nation's most critical assets are built in its own factories, maintained by its own engineers, and governed by its own laws. It is a transition from a posture of reliance to a posture of leadership, sending a message that echoes far beyond the borders of North America, that a medium-sized power can and should hold the keys to its own house. As this story unfolds, we are witnessing a turning point where the costs of dependence have finally been recognized as too high. The decision to prioritize control over alignment is a courageous step toward a truly autonomous national strategy. In a world where trust is no longer guaranteed and alliances shift like the wind, the only guarantee of security is the strength you build for yourself. By choosing independence, Canada isn't just buying a fighter jet. It is investing in its own soul, ensuring that for generations to come, the maple leaf flies over a nation that is truly, and finally, the master of its own destiny. The journey from the F-35 to the Saab Gripen is not merely a change in procurement, it is the recalibration of Canada's national compass. Throughout this exploration, it has become clear that the decision facing Ottawa is a choice between two diametrically opposed futures. One path offers the comfort of a high-tech black box integrated into a foreign superpower's influence, while the other offers the hard-won dignity of industrial self-reliance. This is the grand synthesis of the Carney era, a strategic recognition that in a century defined by America First volatility, Canada must finally become its own North Star. The true value of this transition lies in the long-term compounding of national strength. By choosing to build, maintain, and evolve its own defense ecosystem, Canada is not just escaping a dependence trap. It is investing in a strategic insurance policy. When a nation controls its own source code and assembly lines, it gains the diplomatic leverage to resist political bullying and protect its Arctic sovereignty on its own terms. Understanding these deep-seated shifts in global power is exactly why we analyze these moves so closely. To ensure you never miss an update on how the geopolitical map is being redrawn, consider subscribing to Bradley Madden US. We go beyond the headlines to decode the strategies that define the fate of nations. As we often discuss, we are at the dawn of a post-American defense era for many allies. Canada is simply the first domino. Is the era of the client state finally over? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Ultimately, the economic revolution of 3,500 jobs and a multi-billion-dollar aerospace hub is the heartbeat of this new independence. It proves that national security and prosperity are two sides of the same coin. Every Gripen that rolls off a Canadian line will be a testament to the fact that a medium-sized power can compete with giants when it has the courage to prioritize its own people. Mark Carney's looming decision is a signal to the world that Canada is no longer content to be a passenger. By embracing this model, Canada is stepping into the driver's seat of its own destiny, confirming that its skies, its technology, and its future are no longer up for negotiation in Washington.